Porque, coisa curiosa, uma vez eu disse que o nosso Estado estava tornado um narco-Estado, quer dizer, um Estado capturado pelo narcotráfico. E alguns disseram que, Venâncio, você está a exagerar. Eu disse, vou provar que não exagero. A heroína, nos últimos 25 anos, foi o maior produto de exportação do Moçambique. A heroína, a base da heroína, ela é produzida no Afeganistão. Do Afeganistão passa pelo Paquistão. Do Paquistão vem a costa oriental da África, passa pelo Quênia, por Tanzânia e veja para onde é que passa em Moçambique, Cabo Delgado. De Cabo Delgado vem a Maputo, de Maputo, África do Sul vai para a Europa. Passam pela costa de Moçambique por ano, mais de 40 toneladas de heroína. E que prefaz uma venda, uma receita de cerca de 800 milhões de dólares. Olha, nem o Estado moçambicano não consegue fazer cobrando impostos durante um ano. Mas a heroína faz isso. Então, nós temos um negócio que está há 25 anos a durar usando a costa para transportar droga. Então, como é que nós não somos um narco-Estado? Foi com base nisso que o próprio Carlos Cardoso fez em 2000 um artigo que ele dizia assim, o grande negócio da droga. Estava a falar exatamente da heroína. É por isso que em 2010, o Barack Obama, presidente dos Estados Unidos, vocês sabem, ele decretou Mohamed Bashir Suleiman, do MBS, como barão da droga. E toda a gente dizia que o Barack Obama tinha exagerado, mas soubemos depois, quando todos os bancos saíram do MBS, então, o único banco que tinha ATM lá, sabes como é que se chamava? Nosso Banco. Sabes quem era o sócio do nosso banco? Um dos sócios do nosso banco é aquela empresa de sempre, que já vem lá há 30, 40 anos, SPI. É o holding do Partido
Hello, and again, we're watching the midday view on ENCA DSTV channel 43. We are talking about how Mozambique has become a significant heroin transit route. I mean, if you think about it, it is like an international kind of crime novel of sorts, if I may say so. You've got this heroin all the way going from Afghanistan to Pakistan, all the way on Dhows, all the way to Mozambique, on the road from there, northern Mozambique, to Johannesburg in South Africa, and then to Europe. And governing party in Mozambique, Frelimo, accused of having these alleged links and facilitating and benefiting from it. And you've got a country like South Africa, which is ruled by the ANC, that is an ally, of course, a liberation movement ally of Frelimo, being there, supporting that war against Cabo Delgado. But the drugs are still flowing. It's a big business, and those who are in political power sort of collaborating with the criminals. It's a tragedy, Mwelezi.
It's an absolute tragedy. And on top of it, the fact that our own government is protecting the regime in Mozambique, which is killing, literally killing our own young people in South Africa. We call heroin here in Nyaupe, as you know. This is an epidemic, especially amongst young black people in the townships in this country. And here is the South African army going to Mozambique to defend the same regime that is poisoning young people in South Africa.
David, but the impact on the ground, I mean, Mwelezi is saying on the ground in South Africa, of course, we know how bad drugs are. What's the impact? What are you seeing on the ground from an Amnesty International perspective, but you as a Mozambican human rights activist, what is the impact of this ongoing corruption that's so closely linked with the heroin drug trade?
Let me just say, Mozambique has become a global player in drug trafficking because it's not only drugs from Asia. There are drugs coming from Latin America as well. Recently, there was a number of containers in Brazil found by the Brazilian police that were destined for Mozambique, and from Mozambique, who knows where they were going. A few years back, there was a group of Mexicans found producing drugs in Maputo, and I don't know what happened to that. But the impact of all of this is that the Mozambican government, the Mozambican authorities have shifted their focus in fulfilling human rights, in protecting human rights. So that means what they should be doing in terms of building schools, hospitals, training teachers, all of that is left behind because they are preoccupied in collaborating and facilitating these kinds of trade. That is the impact that you can expect from a government like that. Unfortunately, the peer review mechanism that was created, some decades back to hold African governments accountable is not being used.
Heroin exports from Mozambique via Johannesburg to Europe because it's supposed just to pass here. I mean, from what you know today, have other South African law enforcement agencies really doing something?
They don't seem to be, but I think the change to crystal meth will make a major difference because most of the trade in the past was heroin, which passed through South Africa without much falling off the back of the lorry, and most of it went to Europe. Now about half of the trade is crystal meth, which is produced also in Afghanistan, very easy to produce from a local shrub, and that goes to South Africa. So that's very specifically feeding a South African drug market. And I think that must frighten the South African authorities. But we've seen no evidence yet of any pressure on the Mozambicans to stop the trade.
So, I mean, what can be done here? Can we begin with the President Philip Nyusi's government? Joe, earlier you said from the past 2 decades, there was this kind of connections with one particular family, MBS, that's Bashir Suleiman's company, with the likes of the former President Joaquin Chissano was at the wedding, and the likes of the former President Armando Emilio Guebuza, who was at the launch of a big opening of a shopping center. The new government, President Philip Nyusi, are they doing anything to stop this? I mean, the war in Cabo Delgado is continuing, and when they raid some of the bases, former bases of the insurgent, they are finding heroin and cocaine.
Yes, but what the war has actually done has shifted the route so that the dhows used to come south only to Cabo Delgado province. Then the heroin was put on local boats and then onto lorries and so on and down to South Africa. Now, because of the war, the trade has shifted south. So now the dhows are going a bit further to Nampula province and even as far as Zambezia. But there have been a few seizures, but it's clear that the Mozambican authorities are not intervening to stop this. It's just too profitable. And the South Africans are doing some checks on what goes across the border, but not very much. And it is difficult. You can't check every vehicle that goes across the border and look inside the door panels of every Land Rover that goes through the border. And that's often how this is transported in quite small quantities. But it's a major trade, and it would need international pressure. And South Africa was so anxious to get its troops into Cabo Delgado, which Mozambique didn't really want anyway, that it was hardly going to say, well, stop the drug trade, when Mozambique would have been happy to say, well, fine, don't send troops. I mean, Mozambique is happy with the Rwandans that never wanted the SADC troops.